I was 68 years old, and for the first time in 47 years, I woke up in an empty house. Robert had been gone for 6 months, and the life insurance covered exactly 3 things: the funeral, the outstanding medical bills, and 2 months of mortgage payments. After that, I was on my own. The thing about being married since you were 21 is that you never learn to do everything alone. Robert handled the finances. Robert drove at night. Robert reached the high shelves and changed the light bulbs and remembered to pay the property taxes on time. I taught piano lessons for 30 years, made decent money, but it all went into a joint account that Robert managed. I never even had my own credit card until I was 67. My son, Daniel, lives in Singapore. He offered to come home, to move me closer to him, but what would I do in Singapore? I don't speak the language. I don't know anyone. And honestly, I think his wife was relieved when I said no. So I stayed in our house in Portland, the one with the piano room and the garden Robert planted, and I tried to figure out how to be alone. The fall changed that. I was carrying laundry up from the basement when I missed a step, fractured my hip, spent 3 weeks in the hospital, another month in physical therapy. Daniel wanted to put me in assisted living. I refused. That's when the social worker suggested a home health aide, just a few hours a week to help with the things I couldn't manage yet. That's how I met Sophie. She arrived on a Tuesday morning in late October, carrying a canvas bag with medical supplies and a worn paperback tucked in the side pocket. She was 31, though she looked younger, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. I recognized that smile. I'd seen it in my own mirror for 6 months. "Mrs. Chen," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Sophie Ramirez. I'll be helping you a few times a week." "Margaret," I corrected, shaking her hand. "Mrs. Chen makes me feel like my mother-in-law." She laughed, and this time the smile did reach her eyes. Sophie came 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. She helped me with the exercises the physical therapist prescribed, changed the linens I couldn't quite manage, reached the things on high shelves, but mostly we talked. She told me about growing up in Sacramento, about her mother who worked double shifts at a nursing home to raise her alone, about dropping out of college when her mother got sick. "She has lupus," Sophie explained one Wednesday, helping me fold towels. "The medication costs more than she makes, even with insurance." So I moved back home, got my CNA certification, and here we are. I told her about teaching piano, about the students I missed, about Robert and how strange it felt to sleep in the middle of the bed after 47 years of staying on my side. She listened like she actually cared, not like she was being paid to care. 3 weeks into our arrangement, I started making soup. It started because I noticed Sophie never took a lunch break. She'd work through her 2-hour shift, then rush off to her next client. One Friday, I asked if she'd eaten. "I'll grab something later," she said, but her stomach growled and gave her away. The next Monday, I had a container of chicken noodle soup waiting. Not from a can. I made it from scratch, the way my mother taught me. The way I used to make it for Daniel when he was sick. "Mrs. Chen, Margaret, you didn't have to do this," Sophie said, but she was already opening the container, breathing in the steam. "I made too much anyway," I lied. "It'll go bad if someone doesn't eat it." She ate it standing at my kitchen counter, and I watched her close her eyes with the first bite. That's when I knew she hadn't had a home-cooked meal in a long time. After that, it became our routine. I'd make soup on Sunday nights, chicken noodle, beef stew, minestrone, split pea. I'd pack it in containers on Monday morning, and Sophie would eat it during her shift, sitting at my kitchen table while she updated my care notes. We'd talk about her mother's latest doctor's appointment, about my struggle to manage the garden alone, about nothing and everything. "You know," she said one afternoon in December, "I have 6 other clients. You're the only one who feeds me." "Well," I said, "you're the only one who laughs at my terrible jokes about Chopin." She grinned. "They are pretty terrible." It was true, though. My other interactions were with delivery drivers who left packages on the porch, with phone scammers I was learning to recognize, with Daniel's weekly video calls where he looked tired and distracted. Sophie was the only person who actually sat across from me, who looked me in the eye when she asked how I was doing. That's probably why I was so happy when Emma showed up. Emma appeared in early January, right after New Year's. She knocked on my door on a Saturday afternoon, and when I opened it, I saw a young woman in her mid-20s with honey blonde hair and nervous energy. "Grandma Margaret?" she said, and my heart stopped. I don't have a granddaughter. Daniel and his wife Lynn never had children. But this girl was looking at me with such hope, such desperate need for connection, that I didn't correct her right away. "I'm sorry," she continued quickly. "This is so weird. I should have called first. But I found you through Ancestry DNA, and I've been trying to work up the courage to reach out for months." She explained in a rush. Her name was Emma Harrison. She was 24. She'd taken a DNA test for fun and discovered that her father, who she'd never known, was Robert's son from before he met me. A son Robert never knew about, apparently. A son from a brief relationship in his early 20s. "I know this is a lot," Emma said, "and I totally understand if you need time or if you don't want anything to do with me. But I've never had family. My mom died 3 years ago, and I just wanted to know where I came from. I should have been more skeptical. I should have asked more questions. But I was so lonely, and she seemed so sincere, and the idea of having a granddaughter, even one who appeared out of nowhere, felt like a gift." "Come in," I said. "Let's talk." Emma visited every few days after that. She'd bring coffee from the Starbucks down the street, and we'd sit in my living room while she told me about her life. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, she said, lived in a studio apartment in southeast Portland. She showed me pictures on her phone, her with friends, her at art galleries, her with a dog she was pet-sitting. She asked about Robert, about our life together, about the family she'd never known. I showed her photo albums. I told her stories. I played her the recordings of Robert singing in the church choir, because she said she wanted to hear his voice. "You have his eyes," I told her one afternoon, and I meant it. She did have Robert's hazel eyes, the ones that shifted between green and brown depending on the light. It was Sophie who first seemed concerned. She arrived for her Wednesday shift in late January to find Emma in the kitchen, making tea. They exchanged polite introductions, but I noticed Sophie watching Emma with an expression I couldn't quite read. After Emma left, Sophie was quieter than usual during my exercises. "So that's your granddaughter?" she finally asked. "Yes," I said, surprised by the question. "Well, step-granddaughter technically. It's complicated. How did you verify the DNA match?" The question caught me off guard. She showed me the results on her phone, on the Ancestry app. Sophie nodded slowly, but something in her face had shifted. Over the next few weeks, Emma started asking about finances. It was subtle at first. She mentioned her car breaking down, how expensive repairs were. She mentioned her student loans from a design program she'd attended. She never asked for money directly, but the implications were there. And I wanted to help. She was family. She was alone. She was struggling the way I'd struggled after Robert died. I gave her $2,000 for the car repair, another $1,500 for an unexpected medical bill, $500 here and there for groceries, for rent, for emergencies that seemed to keep happening. Daniel called from Singapore one Sunday in February. I mentioned Emma casually, expecting him to be surprised and pleased. Instead, there was a long silence. "Mom," he said carefully. "Dad didn't have any other children. I've seen his medical records from when he was trying to figure out his family history for his heart condition. He had genetic testing done. There's no way he had a child he didn't know about. But the DNA test. Mom, please, promise me you'll have a lawyer verify this before you give her any more money." I promised, but I didn't believe it. Emma was so sweet, so genuine. Why would she lie? The next Friday, Sophie arrived for her morning shift carrying a manila folder along with her usual medical bag. "Margaret," she said, not even bothering with the usual pleasantries, "we need to talk about Emma." "Sophie, I know you're concerned, but she's a scammer." Sophie opened the folder and spread papers across my kitchen table. Her real name is Emily Harrison. She's 26, not 24. She's done this before. To at least 4 other elderly people in Oregon and Washington. She finds vulnerable people through obituaries, shows up claiming to be a long-lost relative, and bleeds them dry. I stared at the papers, newspaper articles, police reports, screenshots from a victim's advocacy website, and photos of Emma with different hair colors, different names, different stories. Emma, the long-lost niece in Seattle. Emma, the granddaughter from California. Emma, the daughter of a war veteran in Eugene. This is why she wouldn't let you take the soup this week, I said numbly, remembering how Emma had insisted I shouldn't bother making extra, that she was watching her budget and eating at home more. She didn't want me around, Sophie said softly. She knew I'd figure it out. How did you— Because this happened to my mother, Sophie's voice cracked. 6 years ago, a man showed up claiming to be her half-brother. He had documents, photos, stories. He took her for $38,000 before we realized it was a scam. My mother nearly lost her house. She was so ashamed, she didn't tell anyone for months. She just kept working double shifts, trying to recover. That's what destroyed her immune system. That's what made her lupus so much worse. I looked at this young woman who'd been coming to my house 3 times a week, who'd been eating my soup and laughing at my jokes and slowly becoming the daughter I never had. She'd been protecting me, just like she hadn't been able to protect her mother. I've been documenting everything, Sophie continued. Every time Emma visited, I took note of what she said, what she asked for. I took photos of her car when she parked outside. The license plate comes back to a different name. I contacted the victims from these other cases. They're willing to testify. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I needed proof. And because— she looked down. Because you seemed so happy. You had someone to talk about Robert with, someone who made you feel less alone. I didn't want to take that away without being absolutely certain. That's when I started crying. Not because I'd been scammed, not because I'd lost money, but because this 31-year-old woman, who was working 3 jobs to save her mother, had spent her own time and energy protecting me. Sophie called the police that afternoon. They'd been building a case against Emily, for months. My evidence, combined with Sophie's meticulous documentation and the testimony of other victims, was enough for an arrest warrant. Emma was arrested 3 days later at a coffee shop in southeast Portland, where she was meeting another potential victim, a widower in his 70s whose wife had died in a car accident. The trial happened quickly. Emily Harrison pleaded guilty to multiple counts of fraud and elderly abuse. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution to her victims, though the prosecutor warned us we probably wouldn't see most of the money back. I lost nearly $18,000. But I gained something far more valuable. Sophie still comes 3 times a week. I don't really need the physical help anymore. My hip healed well, and I'm steadier on my feet. But the agency lets me keep her because I pay out of pocket now, and because Sophie told them I was her favorite client. We still have soup on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays. Sometimes her mother, Rosa, joins us. I taught Rosa how to make my mother's chicken noodle soup, and she taught me how to make her pozole rojo. We sit around my kitchen table, 3 women who've all lost something, who've all been hurt by people they trusted, and we laugh and eat and slowly heal together. Sophie helped me set up a real relationship with a support group for widow fraud victims. I help other women recognize the warning signs. We share our stories. We remind each other that being trusting doesn't mean we were stupid. It means we were human. Daniel visits more often now. He feels guilty that he wasn't there, that he didn't protect me. I tell him the same thing I tell the women in my support group. You can't protect yourself from people who weaponize your loneliness. You can only learn to recognize it and build real connections strong enough to spot the fake ones. Last month, Sophie brought her mother's ashes to my house. Rosa had died quietly in her sleep, the lupus finally winning after years of fighting. Sophie had been staying at my place for the past week because she couldn't bear to be in her empty apartment. She would have loved your soup, Sophie said, crying into my shoulder. She would have loved you. She raised an incredible daughter, I told her. That's how I know she was an incredible woman. We scattered Rosa's ashes in my garden, the one Robert planted, the one I'd finally learned to maintain on my own. Sophie helped me plant a rose bush in the corner where the afternoon light hits best. She still helps me with laundry sometimes, still reaches the high shelves, but mostly she just comes over to sit at my kitchen table and eat soup and tell me about her week. She's going back to school in the fall, studying to be a social worker. She wants to help people like her mother, like me, like all the victims who fall through the cracks. I'm teaching her piano. She says she doesn't have musical talent, but I tell her that's nonsense. Everyone has music in them. You just have to find the right teacher, the right song, the right moment when everything clicks into place. Sometimes Daniel video calls while she's there, and they talk about music and social work and living abroad. He calls her his sister now. She calls him her annoying older brother. They're planning to visit him in Singapore next year, both of us together. I'm 70 now. Robert has been gone for almost 2 years. The house is paid off now. I used part of Robert's pension to do it, and I'm teaching piano lessons again, working with elderly students at the community center. But I'm not alone anymore. Not really. Because Sophie still comes over 3 times a week, and we still eat soup, and we still laugh at my terrible Chopin jokes. And sometimes, when I play the piano, she sits on the bench beside me and tries to figure out the melody with one finger, determined and hopeful and stubbornly optimistic that she can learn something new. That's what saved me, in the end. Not Sophie catching the scammer, though that mattered, not the money I got back or the justice of seeing Emily in prison. It was the soup, the small gesture of making something with my own hands and sharing it with someone who needed it. The routine of having someone to care for, someone who cared back. The simple act of showing up, week after week, with no agenda except kindness. Emma taught me that loneliness makes you vulnerable, but Sophie taught me that connection makes you strong. And every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I make soup.